The words hung in the desert air like smoke from a dying fire. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen didn't flinch when the young lieutenant said it. Didn't argue. Didn't defend his 47 years or the silver threading through his black hair. He just adjusted his rifle scope and waited. Around him, Marines half his age whispered behind cupped hands. Some laughed. Others shook their heads. The new deployment meant fresh faces, fresh attitudes, and fresh assumptions about what an aging sniper could contribute to a unit built for speed and aggression. They'd seen his file. 23 years of service. Multiple tours. Confirmed kills that read like a phone book. But files don't show the slight tremor in morning hands or the way someone favors their left knee after too many years carrying heavy packs through unforgiving terrain. What they couldn't see was the storm building on the horizon. The mission that would test every assumption they'd made. The moment when experience would matter more than youth, when wisdom would outweigh speed, and when the man they'd written off would become the only thing standing between their unit and complete annihilation. In 6 hours, Marcus Chen would speak exactly 17 words. And those 17 words would save every life in that convoy. Welcome to Silent Salute, where we uncover the extraordinary moments that reveal who we really are when everything is on the line. Before we continue with this incredible story of courage and tactical brilliance, tell us in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. Your stories and perspectives make this community stronger, and we're grateful for each of you. If you believe stories like this need to be shared, stories that remind us never to underestimate the power of experience and quiet confidence, please hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We're growing every day thanks to viewers like you who understand that the most powerful heroes often hide in plain sight. Camp Leatherneck buzzed with the controlled chaos of a forward operating base preparing for night operations. Dust hung in the air like a permanent fog, settling on everything from communication equipment to the MREs stacked in precise rows near the supply tents. The Afghan sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of amber and shadow. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen sat alone at the edge of the staging area, methodically cleaning his M40A5 sniper rifle. Each movement was deliberate, practiced, almost meditative. He'd performed this ritual thousands of times, in dozens of locations, across more years than most of his current unit had been alive. The weapon was an extension of himself, not just a tool, but a partner that had never let him down. Tonight would mark his final mission before rotation home. After 23 years, the Marine Corps had decided it was time for younger hands to take the lead. Mandatory retirement loomed just months away. Lieutenant Davis approached with that particular stride of young officers who'd graduated from Quantico with perfect scores and untested theories. At 26, he commanded respect through rank rather than experience, leading through manuals rather than instinct. "Chen, you'll be providing overwatch from Grid Romeo 7, Davis said, consulting his tablet. "Standard observation and reporting. The younger snipers will handle any direct action requirements." Marcus nodded without looking up from his rifle. He'd heard the conversations, seen the deployment roster. The other snipers were indeed younger. Corporals Martinez and Jackson, both excellent marksmen with sharp eyes and steady hands. Both also convinced that their 20-something reflexes made them superior to anything the old guard could offer. What they didn't understand, what couldn't be taught in training or absorbed from textbooks, was that combat wasn't just about perfect shots. It was about reading situations, understanding human behavior, recognizing patterns that only came from surviving scenarios where one wrong decision meant everyone goes home in boxes. The mission briefing had been straightforward. Intelligence suggested a high-value target was moving through the valley below. 3 separate observation posts would monitor potential routes, while a quick reaction force stood ready to intercept. Clean, simple, by the book. Marcus had read enough intelligence reports to know that the clean, simple missions were often the ones that went sideways fastest. Real combat had a way of shredding perfect plans like paper in a hurricane. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, the temperature dropped 15 degrees in as many minutes. The desert was unforgiving in its extremes, scorching during the day and bone-chilling at night. Marcus pulled on his ghillie suit, the fabric worn soft from years of use, but still effective at breaking up his silhouette. The other Marines moved with the confidence of youth, talking quietly among themselves as they prepared their gear. Martinez joked about getting back to base in time for the football game broadcast. Jackson complained about the weight of his equipment. Neither seemed concerned about the operation ahead. Marcus said nothing. He'd learned long ago that worry was a luxury experienced soldiers couldn't afford. You prepared for everything, expected nothing to go according to plan, and stayed ready to adapt when reality punched your perfect strategy in the mouth. The convoy vehicles rumbled to life in the distance. 8 Marines would head into the valley, establishing positions that would give them eyes on every possible approach route. What none of them knew was that intelligence had missed something crucial. The enemy wasn't just moving through the valley. They were already there, waiting. The rocky outcropping at Grid Romeo 7 provided excellent visibility across the valley floor, but Marcus felt exposed. Something about the terrain didn't sit right, though he couldn't articulate exactly what bothered him. After 2 decades of combat operations, he'd learned to trust those nagging feelings that had no logical explanation. Through his scope, he watched Martinez and Jackson take their positions on the opposite ridge. Both moved well, showing the tactical proficiency that had earned them their assignments. But they moved with the confidence of soldiers who'd trained extensively and fought rarely. Men who believed their preparation had covered every possible scenario. Lieutenant Davis's voice crackled through the radio, coordinating positions and confirming sight lines. Everything proceeded according to plan. The high-value target was expected to move through the valley within the next 2 hours, following one of 3 predicted routes based on previous intelligence patterns. Marcus adjusted his scope and settled into position. At his age, he could maintain a shooting stance for hours without the muscle fatigue that plagued younger Marines. His body had adapted to the requirements of his profession, building endurance in specific areas while accepting limitations in others. The first sign of trouble came at 2,130 hours. A brief flash of light from the valley floor, too quick and too precisely timed to be accidental. Marcus keyed his radio immediately. Romeo 7 to base. Possible signaling activity, Grid 41S, LD, 12345-67890. Copy, Romeo 7. Continue observation. 20 minutes later, another flash. Different location, same deliberate pattern. Marcus felt his pulse quicken, not from fear, but from recognition. Someone was coordinating movement in the valley, using light discipline that suggested military training. Romeo 7 to base. Multiple signaling events. Recommend heightened alert status. Lieutenant Davis's response carried a hint of impatience. Romeo 7. Maintain position and continue standard observation. No deviation from mission parameters. Marcus bit back his response. Standard observation assumed the enemy was following standard patterns. What he was seeing suggested anything but standard enemy behavior. The intelligence report had predicted a single high-value target with minimal security. The coordinated signaling indicated a much larger, more organized presence. At 21:45, the pattern became clear. 6 separate light signals from positions that formed a perfect defensive perimeter around the valley floor. Anyone entering that valley would be walking into a carefully prepared kill zone. But the convoy was already en route. Martinez and Jackson were in position, focused on their assigned observation sectors, unaware that they were potentially surrounded by hostile forces who had been expecting them. Marcus tried the radio again. Romeo 7 to base. I'm observing coordinated defensive positioning. Multiple hostile elements. Recommend immediate extraction of forward elements. Romeo 7, you are exceeding your operational parameters. Maintain position and limit communications to essential reports only. The dismissal stung, but Marcus had faced skeptical superiors before. Young officers often interpreted caution as cowardice, especially when it came from soldiers they considered past their prime. But this wasn't about pride or proving anything. This was about 8 Marines walking into an ambush. Through his scope, Marcus watched Jackson adjust his position, completely unaware that 2 enemy fighters were moving through the rocks less than 50 meters below his location. Martinez remained focused on the primary approach route, missing the coordinated movement happening on his flanks. The convoy vehicles appeared as tiny specks of light moving across the desert floor, still 15 minutes from entering the valley. 15 minutes before they would drive directly into overlapping fields of fire that had been prepared and coordinated by an enemy force much larger and more sophisticated than anyone had anticipated. Marcus made a decision that would either save lives or end his career. He began tracking multiple targets through his scope, calculating ranges and wind conditions, preparing for a scenario that wasn't in any manual or training curriculum. Because sometimes experience meant knowing when to ignore orders in service of a higher duty. Sometimes being too old for combat meant being exactly old enough to see what everyone else missed. The radio crackled with routine check-ins. The convoy continued its approach, and Marcus Chen prepared to prove that wisdom and experience could be more valuable than youth and enthusiasm, even if no one wanted to listen. The ambush began at exactly 2,157 hours with a precision that confirmed Marcus's worst fears. The enemy had been waiting, positioned, and coordinated far beyond anything the intelligence briefing had predicted. What was supposed to be a simple observation mission had become a carefully orchestrated trap. The first explosion shattered the desert silence, a roadside IED that disabled the lead vehicle and left the convoy stranded in the middle of the kill zone. Immediately, muzzle flashes erupted from positions Marcus had been tracking for the past 30 minutes, positions that no one else had identified because no one else had been looking for them. Contact. Contact. IED strike on lead vehicle. Davis's voice cut through the radio static, the calm authority of his earlier transmissions replaced by the sharp urgency of a young officer facing his first real firefight. Marcus watched through his scope as the convoy took defensive positions behind their vehicles, but they were exposed from multiple angles. The enemy had established interlocking fields of fire that turned the valley floor into a shooting gallery. Worse, Martinez and Jackson were now cut off from the main force, trapped on their ridge with hostile elements moving to surround their positions. Romeo 7 to all stations. Marcus keyed his radio, his voice calm despite the chaos erupting below. Multiple enemy positions confirmed. Grid references as follows. He rattled off 6 precise locations, each one corresponding to an enemy fighting position he'd been observing while everyone else focused on their assigned sectors. His words cut through the confused chatter on the radio frequency with the authority of absolute certainty. Lieutenant Davis's response came between bursts of automatic weapons fire. Romeo 7, how did you acquire those targets? By watching, sir. Recommend immediate suppression of enemy positions to allow convoy extraction. For a moment, the radio fell silent except for the distant sound of gunfire. Then Martinez's voice, tight with stress. Romeo 7, I've got movement on my 6. Multiple contacts closing on my position. Marcus had already identified the threat. Through his scope, he could see 3 enemy fighters moving through the rocks toward Martinez's position, using the darkness and terrain to remain invisible to everyone except someone with the experience to know exactly where to look. Martinez, enemy contact 30 meters southwest of your position. 3 individuals moving through the boulder field. You need to displace immediately. I can't see them. Trust me. Move now. Without waiting for confirmation, Marcus lined up his first shot. The lead enemy fighter was 847 meters away, moving through broken terrain in low light conditions with a crosswind that required compensation for both distance and deflection. It was exactly the kind of shot that younger snipers practiced on ranges, but rarely faced in actual combat. Marcus exhaled slowly, found his natural respiratory pause, and squeezed the trigger with the same deliberate precision he'd used to clean his rifle earlier that evening. The suppressed shot was barely audible, but through his scope, he watched the target drop immediately. Romeo 7, confirmed shot, came Davis's voice. Target neutralized. Martinez, you're clear to move. But even as Martinez began displacing to a new position, Marcus was already tracking the next threat. Jackson was in similar danger, with 2 enemy fighters approaching his position from an unexpected angle. The young Marine was focused on the valley floor, completely unaware of the immediate threat to his flanks. Marcus shifted his scope, acquired the target, and fired again. Another precise shot at extreme range under difficult conditions. Another threat eliminated before it could endanger one of his Marines. The radio exploded with chatter as the convoy began to understand what was happening. Someone had been watching the entire battlefield, identifying threats, and eliminating them with surgical precision while everyone else was focused on immediate defensive concerns. Romeo 7, this is base. Confirm your current activities. Marcus's response was calm, measured, and absolute, providing precision fires to protect our Marines, sir. As ordered. Lieutenant Davis's voice cut through the noise. Romeo 7, I need a clear assessment of the tactical situation. And then Marcus Chen spoke the 17 words that would define the mission and prove that experience could never be replaced by youth or enthusiasm. Sir, you've got 12 hostiles in prepared positions. Give me 5 minutes, and I'll clear the route. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Davis's voice, no longer questioning but commanding. Romeo 7, you are cleared to engage all identified targets. All stations. Romeo 7 has tactical control for precision fires. What happened next was a masterclass in applied marksmanship and tactical awareness. Marcus systematically eliminated threats that other Marines couldn't even see, each shot placed with the kind of precision that comes from decades of experience and an understanding of combat that couldn't be taught in any school. He didn't just shoot targets. He read the battlefield like a chess master, anticipating enemy movements, understanding their tactical logic, and staying 3 steps ahead of fighters who thought they had achieved tactical surprise. In exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, Marcus Chen eliminated 8 confirmed threats, suppressed 2 enemy positions, and created a clear extraction route for the stranded convoy. Each shot was deliberate, precise, and absolutely necessary. When the last muzzle flash disappeared from the valley floor, the desert fell silent except for the sound of convoy vehicles starting their engines for the extraction. Lieutenant Davis's voice came through the radio, no longer carrying the confident authority of a young officer, but the respectful tone of someone who had just witnessed something extraordinary. Romeo 7, this is base. Outstanding work. All stations, follow Romeo 7's tactical guidance for extraction. And Marcus Chen, the Marine they'd considered too old for combat, had just proven that some things improve with age. Experience, judgment, the ability to see what others miss and act decisively when lives depend on it. The convoy made it home. Every Marine. Every single one. The debriefing at Camp Leatherneck took place at 0400 hours, in a tent lit by harsh fluorescent lights that made everyone look older than they were. Lieutenant Davis sat across from Marcus, no longer the confident young officer who'd issued orders about standard observation protocols. The tablet in front of him displayed after-action reports that didn't match anything he'd been taught at Quantico. 12 confirmed enemy Kia, Davis read aloud, his voice carrying a mix of respect and disbelief. 8 precision shots at ranges exceeding 800 meters, under adverse conditions, with 0 friendly casualties. He looked up at Marcus. How did you see them when no one else could? Marcus set down his coffee cup, the same deliberate movement he'd used with his rifle. Experience, sir. 23 years of learning to read terrain, understanding how people move, recognizing patterns that repeat across different battlefields. He paused. Age gives you perspective that can't be taught. Martinez and Jackson sat quietly at the side of the tent, both young Marines still processing how close they'd come to being casualties. They'd entered the valley with confidence in their training and abilities. They were leaving with a deeper understanding of how much they still had to learn. I've recommended you for the Silver Star, Davis said quietly. What you did tonight saved 8 lives. Marcus nodded once, accepting the recognition without false modesty or excessive pride. He'd done what needed to be done, using skills that had taken decades to develop and judgment that came only from surviving situations where one mistake meant everyone goes home in a flag-draped box. The convoy had extracted successfully, but the mission had revealed something more important than any intelligence report. In an age of advanced technology and sophisticated equipment, human experience still mattered. The ability to read situations, make intuitive connections, and act decisively under pressure couldn't be programmed into computers or taught in accelerated training courses. As the sun rose over the Afghan mountains, Marcus began packing his gear for the final time. His deployment was ending, retirement looming just months away. But the previous night had proven something that would be remembered long after he turned in his rifle and hung up his uniform. Martinez approached him as he secured his equipment. Staff Sergeant, I owe you an apology. We thought. He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound disrespectful. You thought I was too old to keep up, Marcus finished for him. No apology needed, Corporal. I would have thought the same thing at your age. How do you develop that kind of situational awareness? Marcus considered the question carefully. Time. Mistakes. Learning from every mission, every encounter, every moment when things didn't go according to plan. You can't rush experience. You have to earn it. Jackson joined the conversation, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine curiosity. Will you teach us? Before you rotate home. For the first time in weeks, Marcus smiled. That's what old Marines are for, Corporal. Passing on what we've learned so the next generation can build on it instead of starting from scratch. The final weeks of Marcus's deployment became an intensive education for the younger Marines in his unit. Not formal training, but the kind of knowledge transfer that happens between professionals who've learned to respect each other's contributions. He shared techniques for reading terrain, methods for tracking human movement, and decision-making frameworks that had been refined through decades of experience. More importantly, he taught them that confidence without humility was dangerous, that there was always more to learn, and that the most effective warriors were those who never stopped studying their craft. When Marcus Chen boarded the transport plane for his final journey home, he carried with him the knowledge that his years of service had culminated in something meaningful. Not just the missions he'd completed or the shots he'd made, but the understanding he'd passed to Marines who would carry that knowledge forward into their own careers. The man they considered too old for combat had proven that wisdom and experience were not obstacles to overcome, but advantages to leverage. In a profession that often celebrates youth and physical capability, he demonstrated that some things actually improve with age. Judgment, perspective, the ability to see patterns that others miss. The confidence to act decisively when everyone else is paralyzed by uncertainty. Sometimes the most valuable asset in any unit isn't the newest equipment or the latest training. Sometimes it's the quiet professional who's been there before, who's seen how things can go wrong, and who knows how to make them go right when it matters most. Daniel Chen never needed to prove he belonged. He just needed the opportunity to show what 2 decades of experience could accomplish when combined with the skills that had made him a Marine in the first place. And on that night in the Afghan desert, when lives hung in the balance and perfect plans met imperfect reality, the man they'd written off as too old became exactly what his unit needed to survive. Experience doesn't make you obsolete. It makes you irreplaceable. The lesson Marcus Chen taught that night wasn't just about marksmanship or tactics. It was about the value of institutional knowledge, the importance of respecting experience, and the danger of assuming that newer always means better. In a world obsessed with youth and innovation, he reminded everyone that some things can't be rushed, can't be shortcut, and can't be replaced by enthusiasm alone. Wisdom takes time to develop. Judgment requires experience to refine. And sometimes the person you least expect to have the answers is the one who's been quietly accumulating them for decades. Marcus Chen retired from the Marine Corps 6 months later, carrying with him the knowledge that his final mission had been his most important. Not because of the targets he'd eliminated or the lives he'd saved, but because he'd proven that experience has value that can't be measured in training scores or physical fitness tests. The Marines who served with him that night never forgot the lesson. When they became senior leaders themselves, they remembered the staff sergeant who'd been written off as too old, who'd proven that sometimes age is exactly what a situation requires. And maybe that's the most important victory of all. Not winning a firefight, but changing how people think about what victory looks like. This story was brought to you by Silent Salute, where we celebrate the moments that reveal the extraordinary within the ordinary, the wisdom that comes with experience, and the quiet professionals who serve without seeking recognition. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever known someone who never asked for recognition but deserved more than anyone else? Someone whose experience and wisdom made the difference when it mattered most? Tell us in the comments what they meant to you and how their quiet professionalism changed your perspective on what true leadership looks like. And if you think stories like this need to be heard, stories that remind us that experience has value that can't be replaced by youth or enthusiasm alone, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We'll see you in the next one, where we'll continue exploring Silent Salute that remind us of what's possible when wisdom meets opportunity.